You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. In this show, we go beyond the campfire stories to bring you firsthand encounters from people who say they've seen something impossible, from backwoods trails and remote mountain haulers to quiet farms and crowded highways. The stories come from everywhere, and each one leaves us with more questions than answers. These are the voices of the people who've lived it, so settle in, because today you'll hear another account that just might change the way you see the woods forever. So stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Frank today. Frank is a individual, he's a listener of the show, and he's from out there in Northeast Pennsylvania, the Scranton area, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre. And welcome to the show today, Frank. How are you doing, sir?
Good. How you doing, Jeremiah?
Hey, doing great. I'm excited for this one because we don't get a lot from Northeast Pennsylvania. We've had a few individuals come on the show, but it's not a really popular area like your Pacific Northwest. Any information from this area of Scranton and surrounding area is great to hear from. Feel free, Frank, to take us back to what you experienced that day, and we'll be there right with you.
Okay. All right. So this happened, I'm going to say it was, I don't know the exact date. I know it was after high school. So it was probably 2001, 2002, somewhere in there. And I'm almost positive it was Labor Day weekend. We used to have this place, it's called The Spot. I believe it's marked on my little map there. But everyone, if we're looking for a name, what to name our camping area, and every time we said we're going up The Spot, it eventually stuck. So that's what it was. So anyways, we're camping up there, and our buddies just happen to have another place up. There's a whole ridge of rocks there that are real high. It's a mountain to us. It's not a mountain to you guys out there in the Pacific Northwest, but to us, we're in a whole valley, a big bowl. We're in here. That whole ridge is white rocks. It's all quartz and everything that we call it white rocks. So anyway, they were up above us. And you can actually, there's like the rock is it's hard to walk up. It's about 45 degrees of just rocks. It's like we used to slide down on our butts to get down from there. But so we would go up there from our camping spot, go up to theirs and hang out with those guys. And the only problem is they never brought any wood or anything like that. They were never prepared. And we were a little different. I told my buddy Shane, I said, hey, grab the hatchet and the tree saw so we can get some wood up there. I said, because we're going to have a fire full of plastic and, it's going to be smoking in our faces and whatnot. That's what we did. And we went ahead, we climbed up there. We said hi to everyone. And sure enough, there was a fire pit full of aluminum cans and plastic that was smoldering, and it was horrible. So I said to Shane, hey, let's go get some wood. And as we went up over the rocks, and at this point, we're coming down on the side of the woods where we're getting closer to where the little village is up there. It's still a couple hundred yards in the woods, but we're going like closer that way. And as we're looking for wood, there was all these little black locust trees that were everywhere. And for whatever reason, they're slowly dying out in that area there. And so that's what I would look for. Even if it was at night, you can see them without a flashlight. You'd see these little poles, the trees sticking up with no leaves on them or anything. So we were looking for that, not to mention it's a very hard wood and it burns good. So we're walking down this path and I can't see anything. I can see why they're not getting no wood, because you had to walk a while to get it. So anyway, we get away from the where they're, I would just say the party, because they were camping too. But so anyway, we get down the road, maybe about 100 yards from them, and we find some trees, and we're hitting the tree with the hatchet, and it was basically just bouncing off. It wasn't doing much. We're taking turns cutting trees down, these little trees. They were like, and like I said, they're all dead, but it's a real hard wood, and they're all about 4 inches across. And so it takes a little while to get through them with the little handsaw. And so I would cut one down, he'd hold the flashlight, and then we would take turns. So it turns out that it's his turn to go ahead and cut the tree down, and I have the flashlight. And as he's cutting through the tree, the branch, we're by now there's oak trees all over there, all different kind of trees, but we were by an oak tree, I believe. And the branch above my head starts shaking. And I look up and I can't really see nothing. So I take the flashlight and I point it up at the branch in the trees there, and I don't see anything. And it's only about a second or two later, he yells, "Hey, I can't see nothing." So I put the flashlight back on him. And it wasn't 10, 20 seconds later that the branch started shaking again. And I go ahead and I'm waiting for something to fall on my head, like a porcupine or a raccoon or something, because they're all over up there. And so I take the flashlight and look up, and I can't see anything. And he says, "Hey, I can't see nothing." So we go back and forth with this a few times before I just said, "Shane, hold on. There's something in this tree. I got to find out what's in this tree." So I go ahead and I put the flashlight up, and I'm looking at this branch, and I'm looking for whatever is shaking this branch. And as I follow the branch back to the actual tree, I hit the Y in the tree, and I come down the tree, and now I see what I thought, what my brain, and it's so weird when this happens this way. I thought there was a tree that like fell down, and it was on like a 45-degree angle, maybe something like that. And in my head, I thought there was this reddish moss hanging from the tree. And although it didn't make any like sense really at the time, that's just what I'm thinking in my head. That's what I'm looking at here. So I come down the tree and I see this weird tree with this what I thought was moss hanging off of it. And now I'm like, what is this? And I come down that, and I'm noticing that it's getting thicker. And I don't realize that as I'm panning to the right, I'm actually coming closer to the path that I'm on. And lo and behold, it comes to this big, honestly, it looked like a hairy sheet of plywood. That's what it looked like at first. Like just this big, hairy, I thought it was moss at first, but it didn't take me long to notice, like, what is this? Is this like some kind of hair or something? And the best way to describe it is it had the color of like an orangutan. It was basically like a brownish red color of a deer, I guess you could say, in this area at that time of year. So anyway, I don't know what I'm looking at, and I'm close to it. When I say close, man, I'm sitting here looking, and I was about, at the most, I was 10 feet away. Okay. So this light that I had was one of these older flashlights, and it was the ones that take the big batteries you put in there, and it was plastic, so they weren't really that good. And you push the little button on top. It was one of those ones that you carry. It had a handle on it. And the beam of light isn't like lighting up all around it. It's just hitting this spot, and I could just see what's right in front of me there. And it's like, as I start like coming up with the flashlight to see like, what is this? And I start coming up, and now I'm on the stomach. I'm right even, like, I know this now, but I was dead even, probably right above the belly button. And at that point, I was at my eyes. It was where my eyes were even. And I was 5'11", so, it was about 5 foot high. And I start coming up with the flashlight, and I'm going straight up where I'd be its chest now. And as I'm getting closer to what it would be where its shoulder and the neck is, I could see from the light, like the edges of the light, I could see where the arm was going up to that tree. Like I could see where the armpit would be there now. And I could see, as I'm coming up, I could see the head starting. And as soon as soon as the light starts getting near its face, this thing let out a huff. That's all I could say to describe it. Is it was like, and it reminded me of how a horse like does that, like when it huffs, when it's mad like that. It reminded me of that, but it did it with such force and it was so loud that I dropped. I had a hatchet in my left hand, the flashlight in my right hand, and it like hit me. I felt the air. It was, if you want to call it air, almost when people describe it as a bass, the big speaker, when the bass comes out and hits you, it was like that. It was like I was hit with this. And I dropped everything. I dropped the flashlight. I just like, it almost paralyzed me for a second. Like and my hat, it was with such force. I had a hat on backwards, and it was one that had the snaps on it that you can adjust it. and it lifted that hat up off my head. It was that much force. And this was all in one motion. I was an athlete then, and I could run very fast. And so in one motion, as that's happening, I drop my stuff, and I'm turning at the same time, grabbing my hat off my head, and I take off down the path. I'm going back to where we came from. And I just left Shane. I didn't even, unfortunately, I wasn't even thinking about him. I was just thinking about getting the heck out of there. I'm running for my life because I don't know what this, I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't know if it was a grizzly bear or if it was a Bigfoot. I didn't, and at that point, it didn't matter because both of them were bad. So I was just trying to get the heck out of there. And like I said, as I'm running, the ridge to the rocks is to the right of me, and it goes up and down at different heights. You still got to climb up those rocks to get over them, to get where all these people are at, and that's what I'm trying to get back to. So I run back there as fast as I could, and I climb up the rocks to get up there, so this way I'm up higher, and at least I thought I'd be safe if I was up there. And I happened to see the flashlight coming through the woods. I guess Shane grabbed the flashlight and chased after me, and he comes running back, and when he gets to the rocks, his eyes are big. His eyes are really big, and he's going, "What was that? What was that?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, "I don't know what it was." And he climbs up on the rocks next to me, and he's looking in the woods. He's shining the flashlight down there, and I'm telling him, "I don't, a grizzly bear?" And he's like, "That wasn't a grizzly bear." I said, "I know." I said, "I don't know." And I'm like, and I at that time, the internet was still very new. The only reason I really went on it was for two reasons, and that was to download songs off of a certain thing. I won't say it on here, but back then everyone would know there was a certain thing that you can download songs. They eventually got sued for it, so I won't go into that. But we download songs, and we talk on AOL, and that was about all I really did on there. I had no idea that there was a BFRO, and I wasn't even. It wasn't that I didn't believe in Sasquatch. I really thought there would be a possibility that there was a Bigfoot, but I never thought in a million years they would be in Pennsylvania. But I also knew there wasn't no grizzly bear. So to me, it would have been, I wouldn't say just as crazy for there to be a grizzly bear than a Bigfoot, but they're both seemed, I knew what I seen. I knew what he's seen with me. And it just, I couldn't figure out in my head what it was. And it stayed that way for, I'm going to say 16 years, 17 years that I didn't know what it was. Now, the next day I confronted my uncle about this, and I was telling him what happened. And he said it was probably a buck and rut. He said so this way I know it was Labor Day, because he said they're in rut at this time, because he was telling me it was probably up on a rock and it probably huffed at you. And I said, "Matt, this was no deer. I know what a deer looks like. We go hunting and whatnot." I said, "This thing was huge." I said, and I'm putting my head back, how high I had to put my head back to look up at where its head was. And now I didn't see its face, and I thank God I didn't, because right when I got to where its mouth was, where I can actually, where the edges of the light started lighting its face up, is when it huffed like that. It gave that huge huff. And, and to this day, I wonder how much it would haunt my dreams, but I didn't see its face. But nonetheless, I knew that it was not. This thing had arms. I didn't see fingers, but I did clearly see in the arm. I clearly seeing the outlines of the legs, the torso, the arm that was sticking out onto the tree, the shoulders, and there was no neck there. It's just its head just started right where I expected there to be a neck, but I didn't even know what I was looking at first. And although I knew what it was, I never heard any stories of it being in Northeast Pennsylvania. I never heard of anybody seeing a Bigfoot in Pennsylvania or anything like that. I read, ironically, and hopefully we'll get to that, is like I was telling you, when I was a kid and I happened to see those lights, those orbs. So I was looking in a book of, I forget the exact name of it. It's a blue book. And I hear a lot of people reference this book, ironically, Mysteries of the Unexplained, I think it was called. And in this book is where I seen ball lightning. And I thought, man, maybe that's what I seen, the ball lightning. And ironically, you flip over a few pages and here they have a whole section on Patterson-Gimlin footage, the film, and it shows Patty there, and that is where I really started looking into Bigfoot. And I'm going to say I was a teenager then, 13, 14 years old. So really, that's all I really knew about Bigfoot. That and Harry and the Hendersons, obviously. Everyone knew that. But other than that, I didn't have much other information to go off of. So for years, that's where it sat in the back of my mind. And I didn't want to, it was weird. For a while, I was afraid. I was afraid to be on my quad in the woods, driving home for a while, because I knew that there was something out there. I didn't know what it was, but I knew there was something out there. I was afraid, but little by little, that went away because I didn't know what it was, and I didn't realize how prevalent these sightings were. And it just went away, got in the back of my mind, and I didn't think about it for a long time until, I'm going to say, maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago. I happened to be on YouTube, and somehow another one of these sites, I don't know if I should say their names, but it's a chronicle show that happens to do with encounters. And it happened to pop up. Somehow I started listening to it, and I hear this lady telling her story, and I'm going, there's other people that seen these things. This isn't just a sighting of one crossing a road or something like that. This is somebody telling exactly that they seen it with their own eyes, and she's telling her whole encounter. And so that went on, and I'm listening to these, and then all of a sudden one day, I would listen to them a lot of times when I would fall asleep. I'd like to just listen to them until I fell asleep, and I hear a lot of people saying that they do that as well. But the one day, I'm sitting there with my phone on my chest, and it was actually a woman telling a story about an encounter. And I'll never forget when she said, it huffed at me. And I sat up. I heard it. Somebody else said, and she described it almost exactly the way it did it to me. And it was at that point that I knew for a fact that that was it. Now, also, I started to find out that there is a lot of sightings in Pennsylvania, which I did not know. So little by little, I started realizing, Frank, it was what you thought it was. No doubt. It was. I knew it wasn't a grizzly, but what else is brown and hairy and stands 9 feet tall in the wilderness? There's two things that I can think of at this point. And in Pennsylvania, and that's going to be a Sasquatch, and it's not going to be a grizzly in this area. Maybe out in the Pacific Northwest, out that way, you have grizzlies, but there's only one thing that it was, and I know what I seen, and there's no doubt in my mind that was a Sasquatch. Now, what gets me is I don't know how it got there. I don't know. Were we making noise? We weren't trying to be quiet or nothing like that. The tree saws going. I guess that would possibly make enough noise that I wouldn't hear it walking, but it is just so strange when I hear people now talk about the paranormal aspect to these things of just showing up. And it was like that. It was almost as though it was just not there one moment and it was there the next moment. Now, there's no doubt that with us using that hatchet and hitting the tree, that possibly that would, if it was anywhere in that area, and there could have been more than one for all I know. But if it was in that area, I could see how it would go. What are these guys doing over there? It would sound like tree knocks with the hatchet hitting those trees. So I think to myself, maybe that's what drew it in. I don't know. But all I know is that it wasn't there when it could have been off to the side, because I am looking for one thing. I'm looking at the path and I'm looking for dead trees. That's what I'm looking for. Trees on the ground or the little trees that were standing that we could cut down. And like I said, these locust trees they're like big sticks sticking out of the ground, 20 feet high. They don't have branches on them anymore, no leaves or nothing, but they're so strong that they still stand like that. And you can push them over if they're not deep in the ground. You just push them right over. But they are extremely hard. So they're really great for burning. They burn up like they have fuel inside them. So that's what we were looking for. So the thing could have been to the side of me. It could have been behind us. I have no idea. But it was as though one moment it wasn't there, and before I know it, it was behind me. And it's just crazy how it started shaking the tree, like almost like I can't believe these guys don't know I'm here or something. It's something I'll never forget. But now that I know this, now that I know that they're here, it makes going camping I wouldn't say impossible, but there's times at night when we're cooking food, and that's what really scares me when I think about it the most is when I'm cooking and I think, oh boy, what if something smells this food?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not afraid of black bears. I'm not afraid of anything else like that. But the food is what really gets me at night. Like the last time I was in the woods, actually, and I wonder if my uncle felt this too, because I felt this feeling like come over me that we were being watched. And it was weird that he like wanted to get out of there right then too. And we no sooner, and it was in the wintertime. So it was as quiet as could be. And this whole ridge here has lakes upon it. So we were up there on a reservoir, not lakes, but reservoirs. There's ponds, there's reservoirs. Actually, that entire top of the mountain, that entire ridge there has ponds that go throughout it. So if you were a Sasquatch that was moving from south to north or north to south, that is exactly the way it would go. It would, if I was them, that's where I would be up there. There's water. There's even spring water that comes out of that running down the mountain in multiple spots up there. There's all those little ponds that are prevalent with frogs and fish and snakes and all the other species of animals that are in this area. Anyway, that was that encounter. And so you go ahead if
Frank,
you want to ask me any questions about it.
Absolutely. That is some wild stuff, man. It's really interesting. First question about your actual encounter. So you were there and you're about 10 feet away. So you, of course, heard the huff. Was there any weird smell in that area at the same time?
No, there was no smell. Like I said, there's no smell. I had no way of knowing it was there other than if it didn't start shaking that tree, I probably we would have cut that tree down and just walked away from it. I did not know it was behind me. Yeah, no smell, no way to know. I didn't smell anything. Not that I remember anyway. Not that I remember. I don't remember a smell.
Another thing that stood out, you said the area was really full of a lot of quartz. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I have some right in front of me that my buddy, he goes hiking up there all the time and he will dig them out of the rocks and he has little jars full of them.
Wow. Yeah, that's a definite pattern that comes up in a lot of these. You've heard the interviews on the different shows. It seems that quartz does seem to come up a lot, sometimes granite, but I would say more often than not quartz as well. And it almost looks like if you're looking at it, the area that you gave me on the map, it's not too far away from a lot of different wooded areas. And you have the different state game lands, even some state parks in that area, right?
Oh, yeah, you can go. Like at the time, it seemed like we're not that deep in the woods, but when you look at it, and now, even back then, there was a lot more area. There was a lot more woods. Like construction had really, unfortunately, taken away a lot of the forest around here. They keep saying that they're coal mines and it's mine scarred land is what they say, but that's not the case at all. This is the nature will always take over what was hers. And Mother Nature had already taken back. You couldn't tell if you walked through there if there was coal underneath. It was already, even the little ponds that were once yellow when I was a child were actually no longer yellow, and there was bass in them and fish in them, and people were able to fish them now after, I don't know how long it took, but I know it was 20 years from when it was yellow to where they were able to fish. And now, unfortunately, they're building warehouses in those same forests and just mowed all them over, just filled the ponds in. So that's unfortunate, but that's what happened. But yeah, there is, when I look up through the Hazelton area, you can go for miles and miles you'd have to cross a road here and there, but you're going to be in the wilderness for a long time.
Absolutely. It's such an interesting area. Pennsylvania in general is. And so first off, you said this was around 2000 to 2000 or 2001 to 2002-ish, around that time period.
Yeah. Right around that time. Yeah.
Yeah. You go driving around that area and I don't know if people get what it's like without going to that area. It is there's a lot of very, I would say, mountainous hills you're having to drive around. I actually spent some time in a place called Clark Summit. It would have been.
Oh yeah, where they seen the white Sasquatch up there.
Yeah, exactly. This is about the year. It was 2000. It was right before 9/11 when I was there. As you just said, yeah. So Carbondale is in this area too, and
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you have the accounts of the white Bigfoot, and there's actually a video that showed up on YouTube, and that was all the way back to 2008. So people can check that out. I'll have a link to it in the show notes for this too. But that's not too far away. That's probably about an hour we're looking at.
Yeah, at the absolute most. If you jump on 81 north, you're going to get there in about an hour, 45 minutes.
So we know that there's other activity going on, and the Poconos are north of this area, right?
No, they're actually southeast.
Okay.
So if you went a little more south, and then they're southeast basically. That's exactly what they are.
Gotcha.
We are right at the edge of the Poconos. Really, this is the edge of it. There's imaginary line, I guess you could say, that they say it. This is the Poconos, and this isn't. But I would say coming up to this area right here is where it basically ends. It doesn't matter to a Sasquatch or any other kind of animal. Forest is forest. So,
Absolutely.
But it's right at the edge of the Poconos.
Some wild stuff. Also, really this is something I was going to ask you about. If you mentioned there was really no neck, which, you didn't get to see a face, but the fact that you didn't really see a neck, that's a huge indicator for sure. Did you notice how long the hair was? Did you get to see that at all? Like, was it hanging down from the arms?
Well, not the arms. Yeah, I could tell you that the hair on the arms was about 3 inches. I'm going to say it was hanging off its forearm, and I could see its forearm. I didn't know at the time it was a forearm until now when I'm looking back in my head and I go, oh my goodness, that was its forearm. That was its upper arm, its bicep there. And it got bigger just like a tree would. And it just slowly got bigger. And I'm like, but as it hit its torso, it went from being longer, and then it went and got shorter. And then all of a sudden, my light is directly in its torso. And it was... there was, man, it's hard to explain. It was gray, like almost like dry mud would turn in that area. It turns like a grayish color. And I swear that there was dirt. There was like dry mud there with the hair too. And I can't tell you how long that was, but I'm guessing it was probably about the same length, about 2 to 3 inches. It was all about the same length. I was easier to see how long that was because of the way it was hanging off the arm bases versus this is hanging off its chest on its stomach. So I'm just going by about 2 to 3 inches, I'd say.
Gotcha. Have you ever had a conversation with Shane asking specifically, okay, when I ran away from you, what did you notice, or what kind of things happened up there before you started running too?
Yeah, actually. But he basically told me that the flashlight was on the ground. He just grabbed that flashlight and was right behind me. Oh. And he was only about maybe 3 seconds behind me. I'm fast. I'm not that fast. He was maybe 3. He grabbed that flashlight. He actually left the tree saw right where it was, and the hatchet stayed where it was too. So that's how I went. I didn't go the next day. I went it would have been 2 or 3 days later because honestly, I wasn't in a hurry to get back there. I wanted to, but I was scared. I know that it was something that shouldn't have been there, whether it had been a grizzly bear or what I really thought it was a Sasquatch. It was just that in my mind, I'm saying both of them are unlikely, but what would be most likely? I'm saying it would have to be but what would a grizzly bear be doing here? I'm going to myself, and I'm thinking, and if Sasquatch are real, if they're a real thing, they would only be out the Pacific Northwest. I never even heard about them being in Pennsylvania. So that's where my head was at that time. And as far as my uncle's theory that being a buck, that's one of the reasons I want to go back there. One, I needed to get my tree saw and get the hatchet, but there was no rocks anywhere in that area. And the actual rock ledge that I'm talking about, the white rocks, that is there. That was about 30 or 40 yards. At the time, it was to my left, up the hill to my left, and the road was down to my right. And there's a stop sign that's right there, and I could see that street light. There's a street light right there. I was able to see that street light through the woods, through the trees. So that's how I knew how we were getting close. And we weren't going to go any closer to the road or anything looking for wood, because that's where we're like, oh my goodness, we already came this far. We're almost near the road. So that was the last tree we were getting. And then we were going to walk back and collect what we sat down next to the path and grab all that wood and go back, which we never ended up getting that wood, getting it, because it didn't matter at that point. I ran right past it. How I did not fall or trip over something is beyond me. I have no idea how I got through and got up to that spot and ran up that path without falling, without a flashlight, but somehow I did it. But like I said, Shane was right behind me. By the time I got there and climbed up those rocks real quick, and it didn't take long, and maybe a second for me to hop up there fast. Like I said, I was very agile and in really good shape. I played football. I was on track and whatnot, so it wasn't much for me to jump on that rock and climb up on top of there. And it was only about 15 or 20 feet high, really, that little mound of rocks that's there on that side anyway. It's not that in that area right there. It wasn't bad at all. That's why people would go ahead and climb over that. And then it was flat on the other side, and it's still there, and people still go up there, I imagine. But I believe they have quad paths up there now. At that time, you had to walk up there, but it was the lookout. We called it the lookout, and it was enough room for you to. It's flat. There's enough room to put a tent, or maybe you can even probably put 2 or 3 tents there. But, and like I said, they had a big fire pit, and you can see the entire Wyoming Valley. That's Luzerne County. You can see everything. So you're overlooking Nanticoke and Hanover Township, but you could see the lights all the way up. Actually, I could see the lights all the way up to Carbondale from there. You could see Montage Mountain, where they have the ski resort up there. So you can see you're up so high and there's nothing, and that's why we would go up there. And there was other experiences, other things that happened there. If you want me to, whatever you want, if you want me to go into that, you just let me know.
Yeah. Before we do, I took a quick look at the sighting map I have just to refresh my memory over on the website, BigfootSocietyPodcast.com. And I actually have there's a few episodes about the Poconos, and this is really interesting. One was a guy who saw what looked like a big gorilla in the woods near his new house. So that was in the Poconos around 2002. And another guy said he saw an 8.5 foot tall black Bigfoot cross the highway in fall 2001. And he said there were other multiple reports from people in the same week. So fall 2001, 2002, that kind of lines up with your time frame as well.
Yeah.
And not too far away from the area that we're talking about. So there could have been something interesting going on in that time period down there in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, and the Poconos for sure. But
yeah, it could have been that one of the theories is that they migrate, and when you look into where the berries would be, where they'd be ripe, and where they might be at that time, whether they were north and they're going to head south, that's if they're following the birds, possibly that's at the time where the birds start heading south in this area. You'll see the geese. That's when we know that winter's coming. The calendar can say one thing, but when you see the geese coming over your head and they have a nice V that they make, and they start heading south. When you see them going south, that's when you know that fall is here and the cold weather's coming. Look at that. They might have do the same thing. And that's why they might have been in this whole area at that time. So who knows?
Absolutely. You mentioned before the show started that you've also had some other things happen actually earlier in life that once you started to look back at your memories, there's some other interesting stuff that happened. Do you mind sharing about that as well?
No, absolutely. I'll tell you what, there's this one before, and then there is some other things I'd like to get into, but we'll start when I was a child and I lived, actually, it's in Scranton. It was more towards Scranton in the music area, which is, it's just going up towards Scranton, going north, was a park. It was called Rocky Glen Park. And at one time it was a glen. They had it's a pond. It was a lake, but it's barely a lake. It was a reservoir, really. They had a dam there, and they dammed it up, and they turned it into a reservoir. So it's basically just a big pond for those who don't know. But eventually they created an amusement park around this. And so my father he is an artist to this day. Obviously, if you're an artist, you don't stop being an artist. He would do artwork for them. And at the time, they had a fun house that he would have to do. They had a carousel that they were getting horses in that needed to be painted and restored. And so there was work every day for him up there. So eventually, instead of him making a trip from this area of Wilkes-Barre up to Scranton, the owner said to my father, whose name is Frank also, why don't you just move in the house and back, Frank? We have this house open. Why don't you just move in there with your family, and you can come to work every day and you'll be there? And that's what we ended up doing. So for the first 6 years of my life, I was lucky enough to actually live with an amusement park in my front yard. And this is when the park was not opened. We would literally have to unlock the main gate to drive into the park and drive our car. You're going right past the Spider, right past all these rides. And then there's a little tunnel type thing that you go underneath the roller coaster into the picnic area that's in the back. And you're passing a bunch of pavilions that are back there that had, picnic tables under there. And the last pavilion served food back there. And after that pavilion, the road ended right at our house. And that house was the chalet that back in the day, in the 40s, 50s, and it could have been before that, but I know it was in the 40s and 50s when they were doing Old West. They used to call it Ghost Town at the Glen. And they had actors that they would put up in that house, that chalet. They would go ahead and they would stay there throughout the season, and then they would act and do their show and whatnot. And at the end of the season, they would go back to wherever their home was throughout the country or the world. I don't know. But once that stopped, the house was empty. So we were lucky enough to live there. So with that being said, we're in the woods. There's a lot of woods there. And there is a lake, streams, spring water and whatnot. And we had 2 dogs that I thought they were just incredible hunters because they would always come back with deer legs. Now, once in a while, they would catch a duck, and my father would be very upset. My father was not a hunter. I got hunting from my uncle. But my father would be really upset at them for chasing down animals, but they don't know they're animals too. They would do their hunting themselves. But anyway, they would always come home with deer legs. And I thought that they were just exceptional hunters and they were running deer down. But as I got older and I started looking into this, or at least thinking back, I don't know where they were getting all these deer legs from, but they'd be coming back with parts to deer skulls and whatnot quite a bit. So yeah, it could have been coyotes, but this is the other thing that makes me think, and I didn't get to tell you this. And for anybody that's offended, I apologize, but I got to tell you exactly how it went and what was thought at the time. So after this, I can maybe send you a picture of the house that I got. It's not a very good picture, but it'll show you that the windows were about 6 feet high. That's where the windows started, the bottom of the windows at this chalet, this house. And so with that being said, that you know that now, there was times when, now there'd be people in the pavilion. So we'd have people that would know we lived back there. They knew there was a house there. And unfortunately, we got robbed a few times also when we weren't there, thankfully. And there was one time that somebody had broke in and actually assaulted, knocked my mother out cold, and they just left. I guess they didn't expect anybody to be there. And they had punched her in the face and then left. And I don't know who it was or what, but that's one thing that happened. And my father had come home and found her there. So my point is that there was people that would be up there at times. And so my mother is there with my Aunt Ruthie, which is her sister. And all of a sudden they would see somebody standing outside looking through the window. And they thought they didn't take into consideration that for somebody to be standing out there and have their head up that high to be looking in a window, they would have to be about 8 foot tall. And they didn't think about that. They were just afraid that there's somebody out there and they could see that somebody's looking in the window. And then the next thing you know, the person would be gone. So that's one thing that happened there, which I heard on other shows, that these people that are out in the country, similar things would happen. And so with that being said, then we have the day I wake up on Easter and I go outside and I'm thinking I thought I found the tracks of the Easter Bunny, because there was huge tracks in the dirt that were big human footprints, very large, 16 to 18 inches long and about 8 to 10 inches wide. And in my head, I'm thinking about the Easter Bunny that you take pictures with, and that they have these big feet. So and it was Easter morning. I'm thinking, the Easter Bunny, these are the Easter Bunny's tracks. My cousins end up coming because, like I said, it's Easter, it's a holiday. They come up, and here I am. We're trying to tell my uncle and my father and that, and they're going, yeah, sure it is. Of course, they don't. We're just kids, and they don't realize what we actually see. And I didn't realize it either. That's what it was until, like I said, looking back on it now, I'm going, oh my goodness, this stuff, it's all adding up to the fact that there's a good possibility that these things were out there then. And then what happened was, the one night, me and my sister, Melissa, and she doesn't remember this, unfortunately. She did years ago when I asked her when we were growing up, but at this point in adulthood, she doesn't remember. But we were sitting and watching TV, and we're kids. We were sitting on the floor, and the TV was in front of us, a couple feet in front of us. And to our left was the windows, and out to that left there is where the lake would be. The reservoir was down through the woods there. And it was a really bad lightning storm that we used to get up there. And all of a sudden, it was so crazy even to think about it right now. These two balls of light, one was orange and one was green. And the best way I can describe them is they were the size of softballs. And I seen something like them once that was, it looks like it's the ball that I seen that it would be something that you would see at like Spencer's Gifts at the mall or something like that. I don't know, but it's a ball that lights up, that looks like it has like a silvery like fluid inside of it. These things look like they were orange and green, and it was a light. I was close enough to see that it was a ball, that I could see the outline of it. And then it only gave out enough light that it wasn't going to light everything up around it. It wasn't like my walls in my house lit up, or it even put light onto the ground. It was just around, just that little bit of light that was around it. And the one was orange and the one was green. And as they came through the window, and the window wasn't open, by the way, it was shut. As they came through the window, they like danced with each other. I'm going to say it was as if they were playing with each other. Like as they floated through, the one went from the left to the right, and the other one went right to left underneath it. And then they went back again to where they were at. And then they did like this, almost like airplanes, like the way the airplanes kind of circle around each other and they do a barrel roll. They did like this barrel roll with each other. And then at that point, they're going through our doorway, and they went right through the front door. And that was it. They were there 1 minute and gone the next, and that was it, out of my life forever. But that's what happened out there. And little did I know that now we come years later, and you have encounter after encounter that they're saying that they see these orbs through the woods, and they tie them to Sasquatch sightings. And I never, ever would have put two and two together had I had not have listened to all these encounters and just went, oh my goodness. I thought it was some sort of ball lightning is what I thought. Because I told a couple people about it growing up and someone suggested that. And that's how I got into looking at in the book, Mysteries of the Unknown. And there's a little section of ball lightning in there that it talks about it. And it even shows like a little illustration that somebody drew. So that was really neat. But that's what happened up there in Rocky Glen when I was a child. But what's more interesting is what happened back in the area here in Wilkes-Barre, in these woods here, close to where I had the sighting, the encounter. Because there was something that happened one night that was absolutely, it's very scary, if you ask me. So we would go up there and we would camp at that spot I was telling you about. And there was one night that the guys, there was some work going on out there, and they were taking the silt from the coal, and they found a way to get money for the silt one way or another. It was at the time when anthracite coal was very big in this area. The silt was just a byproduct that they weren't worried about, but they found a way to use it and to make money from it. So all of a sudden they start working at these places out in the woods. And I guess these guys, there were some people that would go and mess with their equipment. So they would get upset and block the paths off with their bulldozers. And so they would knock trees down, and then we would have to come up there and take a chainsaw and cut the tree up and open the path back up. And this was something that went on back and forth. It was like a little war between us. The one weekend we end up doing this, and I remember me and my buddy Mark, we had to hook chains to these big stumps to get them out of the way once we cut the tree up, because the stumps often had the roots connected to them, and we would have to, through using snatch blocks and using chains and whatnot, to move these big stumps off the road. And one night we end up coming into the woods, and we'd go back there, and there was so many of us that would go back, and we were kids that grew up in rural Pennsylvania. So what we did is we went in the woods. We rode dirt bikes, we rode quads, we did lots of camping, and like other teenagers, we had parties around bonfires. And at this time, I was probably 21 actually. And my cousin was coming up, and we got there only about half an hour before they did. And everything was fine. There was a bunch of people there, and they came up late, and here all those stumps and such were pushed back in the path. They were all back in that road blocking it. So they had to go ahead and get them back off of there. And they did it, but that's one thing that happened that was weird, but it was nothing compared to this next thing. And so here, there's a track bed that goes, it's right in that area there, and it goes all the way up to Alden Mountain, it's basically right down below that ledge of white rocks where you're looking at that map there. And if you could see where the ledge of rocks are, there is a track bed that goes, if you look good enough, you'll see a line through the woods of trees. You can see it through there, and that's where the track bed is. You'll see multiple of them that are through the woods there. So at the bottom, I'm trying to explain it the best I could, but it's close to where I had this sighting at. We'll just put it that way. And the track bed it was about 3 miles long from the one end where we went in and we got onto the track bed. And when I say track bed, they ripped all the, what do you call it? The pieces of wood. They ripped all the ties, the railroad ties off of there, and they took all the metal and they recycled it all years ago when they stopped using those railroads there. So what it ended up doing was making roads in the woods for us to drive down. And that's where we would drive trucks and jacked up trucks and whatnot. So what happened is the one night, me and my buddy Mark were in the woods. We wanted to go for a ride in the woods, and we didn't realize how late it was getting, but we were out there a lot longer than we should have been. But we were young kids, and that's what we were doing. We were four-wheeling in the woods, and we had a couple of beers with us. I think we had a couple of beers. So we're drinking a little bit at a time, and we're stopping, and we're on this track bed, and he had a transfer case he had put in his Jeep you can walk next to this Jeep. It was geared so low. And he would just put it in that gear and it would just go really slow. And we would just sit there and listen to music and talk. And we would stop every once in a while we had all different little places that we would stop at. One of them was a small little reservoir that was there, which unfortunately they just buried. Now it's no longer there. It was a dam that we'd stop there, and we're drinking. So as we're drinking, we would have to stop and use the bathroom. And so we're getting, now granted, this is an old CJ5 Jeep. It was from the 70s. I think that was a 76 maybe. But it didn't have no top and no doors on it, okay? But summertime, we're out in the open there. We're having a good time. And we live like out in the sticks. So it's not like when we get out of the woods, our house is right there. We don't have to drive on the roads far or nothing like that. We could basically take the roads right to the back alley and we're home. So that's why when I'm talking about this, we're out in the woods drinking and driving. We're going slow, and it's not that I condone it in any way. That's what was going on. So anywho, like I said, we're getting out here and there, and then we're getting back in a Jeep. And as we got to the end of the road, we turned around because we reached the furthest point that you can go, and we couldn't believe it that here the sun was coming up. And I said, "Oh my goodness, Mark, we're going to be in trouble." I said, because at that time we both worked with my Uncle Matt, and we knew that we had work in just a few hours, and here we were up all night, and he was going to kill us. We're like, "Oh, he's gonna kill us." So because the sun is coming up now, we can see behind us. We didn't know because we were going, I guess you could say, west, and the sun's coming up in the east behind us. So as we turn around, now we see that the sun's coming up, and the sun isn't even up yet, but the sky is light. It's blue, it's dawn, and we start going back. And all of a sudden, as soon as we went around this one little bend, we didn't go but 50 yards. And here is all the garbage that was off the side of the road, that was in the woods, stuff that you couldn't see. I knew it was there from going down, driving through there throughout the years. You would see what they used to have, beer balls that were plastic balls that were filled with beer back in the day, and they would get them, and then they would end up shooting them with guns and stuff. And this used to be called the strip-ins, strip mining. So people would throw garbage back there. They would dump all kind of stuff, from kid toys. There would be dolls on the side of the road and stuff. But most of it would be pushed to the side and covered with leaves. And now all of a sudden, this stuff is in the road. And there's these little trees, saplings. Most of them were not big, like not thick. I could have pushed these trees over is what I'm getting at. But they were pushed across the path, like bent over. If there was dead ones there, they were pulled into the path. Any kind of rubbish, whether it was garbage or cans or whatever, it was in the road now. And he stops, and we both look at each other in unison and say, "What did that?" We're like, "Where did that come from?" And both of us are going, all of a sudden, it's becoming, what's hitting us, something was behind us this whole time. Something is out here with us. And I don't know what it is, but it isn't some animal that doesn't know what it's doing. It's something that put that stuff there. And in my head, we both look at each other, and I said, "I'm not getting out to move it." He said, "I'm not getting out to move it either." So he takes that thing out of that low gear, and now we're in just normal two-wheel drive where we can go faster. And we just ran this stuff right over, ran these little twigs and sticks over, and these little trees. And I have myself like tucked into the Jeep, and he does also, because now these trees are like pushed into the path, and we're getting hit with them. The Jeep's getting scratched, but I am not stopping. We're not stopping to get this stuff off the road because we don't have any weapons or nothing. We might have had pocket knives with us, but what did this? And what got scarier is this. As we're coming back, it didn't stop. It was like that the whole way back, the whole 3 miles. There was stuff pulled out of the woods and little trees pulled over. And I mean, there was like old broken Tonka trucks, I remember. All kind of crazy stuff that was just tossed to the side, that was buried in those leaves, was now in the road, in the middle of that track bed. And we're going, it's becoming scarier and scarier to go. this thing, whatever was behind us all night, it was back there the whole time doing this, and we didn't hear it. We had music playing a little bit. We have no top on this Jeep. We have no doors on it. So there's no protection or coverage from anything. And something's out there with us the whole time, and we don't know what it was. And I'm not saying it was a Sasquatch, but whether it was a human, I don't know what it was. But if it was a human, why would somebody go ahead and do that knowing we can run that stuff over? That doesn't make any sense. And what did it? I don't know. But it is a very scary thing. And it still to this day, we were talking about it not too long ago, me and Mark, and he said, man, the hair on my arm standing up. He said, I'm just thinking about that. That was really crazy. I don't know what did that. There was another time that we were out there looking for a bunch of our friends, and we said, oh, there's the fire. There they are over there. We could see them down through the woods. We were up on this little knoll, so we could see the fire. And so we hop back in the truck and we're heading over there, and we go down that path, and the fire's not there. And we're going, where'd the fire go? This was a nice big fire. And we can see it from 200 or 300 yards away through the trees and stuff. And all of a sudden the fire's gone. And we're like, I know it was here. And we hear this laugh come out of the woods that it was like the Blair Witch was down there or something. It was a hideous, just scary laugh, like something I'd never heard before, and I never want to hear it again. That it just echoed throughout the woods, and we jumped in the truck and we got the heck out of there, and that was that. That was a totally different time, but there is some weird stuff that happened out there in those woods, and this is all the same. This is all around the same exact time. Okay, this is like that might have happened the next summer. Okay, so this isn't like years apart. This is all around. This is between like 2001 and 2003 to 2004. This is all in that area that this stuff is happening. There was another time we thought a bear. We were on top of those white rocks there, and we thought there was about 12 of us maybe, and we would take hikes. We were younger. We were teenagers at this time, so I was probably 18. And like I said, 2000 it would have been probably. And we would take hikes, and we go up on those rocks because it was a beautiful view. And we go up there to do things that teenagers do. Now those things are legal throughout most of the United States, but back then they weren't. Here, we thought there was a bear down in the woods there because it clearly sounded like a bear. The trees are moving back and forth, but this bear would not leave. No matter, we're yelling, we're throwing rocks at it. It just keeps circling around us. It just keeps going. Now, it couldn't go all the way around us because the white rocks that we were on, this certain area that we were on there, it went down to where it went like the rocks in some parts would go down like underneath the earth to where it would be dirt and ground and stuff again and trees. And then they'd come back up out of the ground again 100 yards over. So we were at like the edge of them. So this thing was circling us from like 2 o'clock. If I were looking at a clock, from like 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock, it was just going back and forth through the trees. And you can see the trees getting mowed over and going back and forth, and they're shaking. And we're throwing whatever we can get in our hands because, like I said, we thought at the time that it was a bear. But as we were there, it didn't make any sense that this bear wasn't leaving. It wasn't running from us or nothing. So what that was, I'll never know. But it happened. Like I said, there was a lot of weird stuff that happened out there during those couple years. And for all I know, that could have been a Sasquatch also. I don't know. But it was definitely some really weird stuff.
Wow. When you put that all together, you're right. That's some weird stuff. And if you look on the map that you gave me, it looks like there's houses up there now. And it almost makes me wonder if the people that live up there are having weird stuff happen too.
I could tell you. All right. I could tell you something, and this will be the last thing that I won't go too far into because I know we're getting close to the end here. But if you look at what I sent you there, you'll see the reservoir that I'm talking about is off to the left there. It's all the way down to the left. And you can see the strip of white rocks. You can see the whole little ledge of white rocks that I'm talking about.
Uh-huh.
And they go all the way down. And that right there is called the Alden Reservoir. And if you look through the woods there, you can see where it goes to a little point where those white rocks are, and you'll see it looks like a path that goes down to a field. And down there is where the smaller reservoir was that I said we would stop at that dam down there and just stop there. Years ago, it used to be gorgeous. It used to have it was made of, what did my father say, marble. It had marble tops on it. And you could see to the bottom 30 feet down. But unfortunately, after people going out there and stuff, they just ruined it, unfortunately. But nonetheless, there was still fish and whatnot in there. Now it's just a pile of dirt. They just filled it in. But anyway, with that being said, the people in these houses that you're talking about, you can't see it on this map, but back in the woods, there's a house that is actually back in the woods. Down Tomko Ave, you can see that Tomko Ave keeps going. And it, for whatever reason, you can see you could see the house there. The house is back in the woods. If you go to the edge of the road, all the way to the end of the road, you see that little house in the woods?
Yeah.
Okay, so that house right there is owned by, I won't say the gentleman's last name, but he's a good friend of the family. And his grandmother used to live up there by herself. And my father said this lady she was a tough older woman who used to chew. She used to have a big wad of chew in her mouth and a double-barreled shotgun sitting on the porch in a rocking chair. And he said that's how she'd be sitting out there. And there was no messing around with that woman. She'd give you 2 barrels real quick if she had to. So anyway, he had said something to me, and he said a name that I couldn't believe because I thought it was all just rubbish. It was all just craziness. So my father used to camp out in the yard there, and that house has no power or no water to it. There's a spring that they actually used gutter, and they took a spring that was all the way up in the woods on the track bed here, which it's hard to see the track bed I could see it, but it would be hard for you to. I just know it's there. But anyway, the spring comes all the way down there, and they use the gutter to get the water all the way down to the house, and then it goes into this little bathtub, and that's how they got water. There's an outhouse there still to this day. But anyway, he said the grandmother used to tell them stories about these little monsters that lived out there. And I couldn't believe it when he said what she called them is topeks. And I was like, what? And he said it again, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So here, when I was a child, that little village, that little town of houses that are there, my friend Jeff and his family live in that area. And he used to tell me about topeks. He used to say this. He said, there's these little ghouls, these little things that run around in the woods. And I'm like, what? You're crazy. I said, you're nuts. And so now my father's telling me this as I'm an adult, and I'm saying, no, you're kidding. And he says, honestly, he said the grandmother told him that they were, I guess you would say, almost like a siren. And they would call you into the water and try to pull you into the water and drown you. Because there's a creek that's back there. And then there's the reservoir back there also. There's all different little pools of water that are, I guess if you want to be a couple feet deep, would be a creek, and then it'd come into a little pool of water. But anyway, you'd say they pull you in there and they drown you. And I just thought it was a tale, as my father did. But I could tell you this. Years later, I had seen this guy's uncles in the woods, and they kept going. Oh, I don't want to insult anybody, but they're not the smartest bunch. I'll just tell you that. They were homeschooled, and if you ever seen, I'll just say that. Some of them weren't, they almost had their own language, okay, at one point. They didn't come off the mountain very much. And that doesn't go for all of them, just some of them back in the day. And these 2 guys were there, and we didn't want them to be there because they were bothering us. And these are his family, and they're his 2 uncles, and they're sitting on this stool, this bench that we had, and we're up at that reservoir. We're up at the Alden Reservoir, and we didn't think they'd follow us, but it says Hanover Reservoir on here, but we were hiking up there, and somehow they ended up finding us. And we're like, oh, great, here comes these guys. And so I had a big Rambo knife on my side that I used to carry. He goes, that's a big knife on your side. He goes, look at that knife, huh? And he said, yeah, that's a nice knife. He goes, that's pretty big. And I just said, I went, yeah. probably big enough for a towpoke, though. A towpeck, though. And honest to God, when I said that, these guys went from a total laughter, laughing there. When I said that word, they stopped instantly, and their eyes got all big, and they looked at me, and he goes, "What did you say about towpecks?" And I said, and in my head, I thought, they believe, like, I startled them. When I said that word, they stopped everything instantly. And I said, it's big enough for towpecks. And he goes, "Oh, yeah." And they giggled a little bit. And before I know it, they got on their quads and they left. And that was it. I didn't see them the rest of the day. They didn't come back or bother us. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know I've searched that word, and I don't know if it's an Indian word that I'm saying wrong, that it's not topek. It's like something that sounds like that. It's just different. But I've tried to look it up and search it, and I can't find anything on it as far as cryptids go. But when I think about that stuff being pulled across the path like that, and I'm going, something small had to do this, because there was nothing big, really big. And I'm like, what could have done this? If it was a mature adult, you would pull something bigger that we couldn't run over in the middle of the road. Like, why would anybody pull these little trees down? And they were trees that were alive were pulled over. And it just made me think back and go, what in the world did this? I think about them saying that there's these little monsters that run around the woods, and I'm like, oh my goodness, can you imagine? That's one more thing that I don't want to think about. Not that I really put much, that I really believe that they're real, but I'll tell you what, there's a lot of things I didn't think were real in this world, that the older I'm on this earth, I come to find out they are. So it seems that there's a little truth in everything.
Wow. Oh my goodness. That area is an area of high strangeness. I'm gonna be thinking about that for a while. Not only just Bigfoot, but you've got multiple other weirdness going on, and I guess you could say that the Wilkes-Barre area of Pennsylvania. And this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you for sharing what you've experienced up there over the years. It has been a very cool chat, Frank. My goodness. I'm trying to think.
Well, thank you very much. My pleasure.
Just a conversation about what your family had to go through and what happened to your mother. I can't imagine having to go through that. You have been
that
through
was
a
horrible.
lot.
That was absolutely horrible.
My goodness. Would you ever go back to that area, or have you been back recently to this area you used to go to as a?
The spot where we called it there. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I do. It's just, I got to be honest with you. When the sun goes down, it's not all the time. I'll be there at night, and I could feel fine. We could be camping out there for 2 or 3 days. And then all of a sudden, I will just get this feeling out of nowhere that it's like you can feel eyes on the back of your neck or something. And it's like, and once that happens and it hits my memory, and I go, oh my goodness. And then that's it. I can't be comfortable from that point on. So it sometimes is harder than others. Obviously, there's the more people that are there, the better I feel out there. And you can have a weapon on you, and I'll be honest with you, it's not that I'm afraid of any Sasquatch or anything, but I would rather not see them. You're not going to find me ever going looking for these things, okay? I don't know why anybody would. I do not, because you don't know. Are you going to go in the woods looking for a gorilla and go, let's just see what a temperament it has today? Because that's basically what you're doing. And I'm not going to be caught doing that. So I go out there, but I'll tell you what, I hope I never see anything like that ever again in my life. I'll be happy if I never do. But yeah, that is, I do go out and I do camp still. I haven't camped up there, but my friends do. And the thing is, there is so much activity now in those woods that they're building that track bed that I talked to you about, right, where there used to be about half a mile of wilderness between the road and that track bed. Now they've cut down the woods almost right up to that track bed.
Wow.
They ruined it out there. It isn't like it used to be. But as far as when you get up on that mountain on top there, who knows? It's still, they call them the greenways, I think they call them, or something similar to that these paths of woods where, if it's true that Sasquatch they do go from north to south, then they're going to have to use those little paths and those little pieces of woods that you wouldn't think that they would be in. And there's still a lot of woods up there. It's just not near me. It's just not where we were used to going as throughout those 20 years that we'd be out there in the woods all the time from the time I was 13 to 33. It wasn't like I stopped going out there. It's just I wouldn't be caught out there by myself or at night. But it's just I know that there's stuff out in those woods. There's stuff in the forest. And I don't believe it. I know it. I know it for a fact. So when you know that, it has a whole nother thing to think about. So anyway, that's my story.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing again, Frank, and keep us in the loop. I know you said people that still go out there, maybe in places you don't go anywhere. And if you ever hear anything else going on, definitely let us know. We'd love to hear about it. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences from over the years today.
Anytime. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And you have a great night. Thank you. Very nice meeting you.
Before we wrap this episode, I want to say something directly to a very specific group of listeners. If you're in the military, any branch or forces, and if you've seen something that no one can explain, or if you're a national park ranger or forestry worker who's been told to stay quiet, or if you're a pilot who's seen something strange down on the ground, or if you're with the FBI, a federal agency, or working intelligence, and you stumbled upon something you're not allowed to talk about, and if you're a firefighter, paramedic, or search and rescue responder who's heard screams or found tracks that didn't make sense, if you're in the logging industry, on a remote oil field, or a trucker with government contracts, and you've had something happen that you've never told a soul, and if you're a biologist, a wildlife specialist, or a field researcher under contract who has found evidence you're not allowed to report, if you're a pastor, a missionary, or someone on a spiritual retreat, and you saw something that shook your faith, or if you work in the shadows, CIA, NSA, or anything with clearance, and you've seen what the public hasn't, then I want to talk to you. Even if it's anonymous, you can reach me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. The world needs to hear what you've been forced to carry alone, and you're not alone. You've got the story. We've got the mic. See you in the woods. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. Every encounter we share reminds us that the world is bigger and stranger than we think, and that the truth is often hiding just beyond the tree line. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the channel on YouTube, hit the bell so you don't miss the next episode, and share this with a friend who's into mysteries, monsters, or the unexplained. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcast, please follow the show there and leave us a 5-star positive review, because all of that helps more people discover the show. And remember, if you or someone you know has had a Bigfoot sighting, please, I'd love to hear from you. So email me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com and let's start the conversation. If you haven't gotten a chance yet, check out our membership community over at www.bigfootsocietypodcast.com. And that's where you can hear tomorrow's episode today, early and ad-free, and members-only episodes every week. Also, it's a place to connect with other people that are into the Bigfoot subject as much as you are. Thanks again for following along with the Bigfoot Society. Until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and never stop asking what else might be out there. And see you in the woods.